Welcome to our podcast on school attendance. My name's Jess Lane. I'm the head of service for our school attendance and safeguarding team at One Education. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about our service to schools, the attendance advice that we provide, and the benefits that schools receive after commissioning us. Ella, this is a particular hotspot of yours around parental engagement. We see so many parents at the moment that are struggling to engage with schools and education, and that sometimes is because of their own previous experiences. It can be because there's been a breakdown in relationship between school and home. Sometimes it's because they've made a complaint and they're not necessarily happy with the response that they've had. What is your advice to schools that are struggling with engaging parents around attendance, and what would you be advising schools?
Always, firstly and foremostly, communicate. The parents need to know that this issue is absolutely not going to go away, and we are here to support. Also, if there is a trusted relationship breakdown with a particular professional or somebody in school, change the person. Yeah, adapt. I think it's really, really important that we look at all of the support that's been offered to the family, what's worked well and what's not. And then what can we do to change that in order to promote those professional positive relationships with the family. I'm actually delivering training next week on parental engagement strategies, and it just goes right back to not one size fits all. How can we be creative in our approach? How can we be bespoke? I was working with a family not long ago, and mum had a severe fear of stepping foot onto school grounds. She had a really poor experience of school herself, and was really quite entrenched around her worries and her concerns of being on school site, and couldn't get her child to school. She was really, really struggling. So first and foremost, I introduce myself, and I always say to parents, hi, I'm Ella. Just want you to put a face to the name. I'm human too. I really do think that's really, really important. And then I ask what works for them. If I go to a meeting, I'll say, what's the parent asking for? Oh, I don't know. What is mum asking for? Is that achievable? Is it realistic? Can we work around that? I've met parents in coffee shops. I've met parents in libraries. I've met parents off site. I've met them at home. Some parents don't want me at the home. Obviously I would have to ask if there's any safeguarding reasons as to why and so forth. But I think it's definitely about what you said, Fliss, about that support first approach, and making sure that actually really we've offered and we've exhausted everything that we can for them families. And on the back of that as well, where are we documenting these offers? What does that look like? Absolutely. Ensuring that schools have a really strong, robust chronologies for these families, where in circumstances that attendance can improve, then actually really, if it has to go to a legal arena, then we've already got everything documented for that to escalate. But for me, first and foremost, early interventions right at the time when the family need it, and being really quite personable. I'll ring families and I'll say, I've not interrupted your morning cup of tea, have I? Have you got 5 minutes to talk? And I think that approach is everything. Sometimes I get to schools and the heads or senior leadership teams are on the gates, and straight away they are, you're late. Tie your laces, straighten your tie, at the family all the time.
It's a barrier up straight away.
Absolutely.
It's a wall, isn't it? And I think for a lot of parents, like you say, in those circumstances, especially if it's an attendance meeting that they're being invited into, or if they're being invited to meet one of our advisors, they're not coming in for a celebration assembly. They're not coming in for something that they feel is going to be a positive discussion. So if they are then met by somebody that is a friendly face, or is offering them a cup of tea, is asking them about the day, how they're getting on, it does help to remove those barriers. It softens the approach, and it allows parents to share, what potentially could be quite a difficult conversation for them, but it just enables them to feel a little bit more comfortable, doesn't it? And gone are the days, as you mentioned, Ella, where we're like dragons towards parents whose children aren't coming to school, because lots of these parents are doing everything that they possibly can as well. They want their child to be engaging in education. It's really, really important, as you say, that support first offer is there. What about you, Fliss? Have you got any other experience of that?
I just think it's so important, especially for us, where we do go into lots of different schools. We are very blessed in that way, that we can experience lots of different kind of environments and learn from lots of different people. But I think sometimes one of our biggest strengths that we have that we can bring to schools is We can walk in full of life. We're not carrying the day before from the same families, the same children, and we can walk in and almost be a refresh for those staff members.
Yeah.
Because, I've worked in schools, I've been that attendance officer that rings that parent the same, every single day. And you do get fatigue. It's not a weakness to say that. You do get fatigue with nothing moving on. You're waiting for this service, or you're waiting for some SEND support, or you're waiting for other external agencies to become involved. And I think sometimes just being able to go into a school and go, I know you've tried it all, but we're going to go again. We're going to give it another go. I'm going to ring that mum. I'm going to ring that dad. And do you know what? We're going to have a chat. I always start off my meetings the same way that you do, just letting that person know that I'm a person as well. I'll speak about my children and the struggles that I have as a parent, because parenting is really difficult and there's no manual that says do this and it works, because it doesn't often work.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important that you see them as a person, because you're going to need them to see you as a person to work with you.
Yeah.
And I just think it's just so important, all the things that you've said about being consistent, being persistent. And at the end of the day, these are people's lives that we're working with.
Yeah.
And I think that we can bring that to a school to give that fresh perspective is really important.
You mentioned earlier, Ella, about being bespoke and understanding that not one size fits all. And that is really, really important, isn't it? Not being rigid with your approach, because every family's circumstances are different. So we need to allow some flexibility in processes, but measuring that is really, really important as well. So if you've offered absolutely everything within your capacity to try and support that family, you need a record of it, and you need a record of those conversations. And as well as, being bespoke and making sure that we're not too rigid in approach, you also mentioned communication, and parents don't want to be blindsided by information or have something, sent to them that they're not aware of. We've got to make sure that we're absolutely clear in communicating what our processes are, and whether that comes from the initial attendance policy, whether it comes from a parent policy around absence reporting or what the day-to-day procedures look like, or even whether it's the data that we share with parents. I say to schools so many times, it's great that you're sharing attendance data, and whether that's through your school comms app or whether it's through your termly reports that you send out to parents. But actually, 82% attendance obviously is a huge concern from an attendance perspective, but from a parent, they might think that 82% is really high, because actually in other areas of education it would be seen as quite a significant a high percentage. So it's really, really important that actually, are we communicating days missed, minutes missed in the morning if it's persistent lateness that we've got a concern about, and what does that correlate to? What does that look like for the impact on the child? Because I think, again, I see this on social media all the time. Parents have this perception, don't they, that it's schools that are nagging for their attendance data, and it's them that have got the concern about.
You don't care about my child, you just care about your figures, kind of.
Exactly. And actually, what we're saying is it's having a huge impact on your child's social and communication abilities. It's having a huge impact on your child's educational outcomes. It's affecting their friendships, because children do move on. If your best friend is off school every day, they move on and they form new relationships, and it's harsh to say, but that's the reality of it. And I think it's so important that that's communicated to parents in an appropriate way. I don't mean it in a threatening or a harsh way, but in a way that's not saying to the parent, we only care about data, and it's your right as it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure your child's in. A lot of parents know that. And they're struggling with other barriers. So it's about what we do in the interim to get those kids back in, isn't it?
I think that's really important, what you've just said, Jess, about just not sanctioning them straight away. We know that they're struggling, and quite often we expect these parents to come to us when they're at a crisis or have got challenges, and actually really we're not being personable. I think it's really, really important about that, and I think we're not here to set families up to fail either. If I'm going to offer mum a parenting course, straight away some parents are insulted, but actually really, if I explain that course is going to give you strategies to understand your child more, if a child has potential ASD or any other speech language communication needs, then actually really that's much more of a sell to a parent to try and get them on board.
It's having it as like a strengths-based discussion, isn't it? And explaining it to a parent and not using it as this is where we're at, so I think you need to do a parenting course. It's about that actually this is what we've identified, this is what we can see. So actually one of the ways that we can support you and your child is we look at this, and it is always needs to be from a supportive point of view. And I think going back to what you were saying before about, you know, it's about what the impact on the child is. A family that I worked with a few years ago, I had two parents who had done quite well for themselves in terms of their careers. However, their attendance at school was incredibly low. Mum often said that they left school with no GCSEs, so they didn't have a great value on education because actually they had done quite well for themselves.
Yeah.
And it was only when we looked at what had been put in place and, you know, what support had been offered, and there'd been lots of very official attendance meetings, lots of kind of warning letters, lots of kind of talking about legal sanctions, that it wasn't getting anywhere. And it was only when, you know, I sat down with both parents and we looked at the child's books, and we looked at the pages where the teacher had written absent from school today. And then we looked at kind of where the child was struggling academically and their attainment levels, that actually sitting there and having that kind of sit down chat and a really open discussion about this is where your child is, but this is the impact of the absence. And it was really, really clear for those parents. And they understood then that actually the absence is making their child in distress, because they were really stressed with catching up and lots of different interventions. And it was that part of it that actually was the thing that kind of opened that door to school, then working with school. And I think it was that letting them know that we care about your child, we want your child to do well.
To
this
thrive.
Absence is holding them back and making school unhappy for them. And it was a really quite a powerful conversation that we had.
I think that's really important what you've just said, Fliss, about we're here, you know, you are cared for, you are safe, you are welcome. If parents do not feel welcomed on school site, then obviously you've lost half the battle there. And as we already know, attendance concerns rarely stand alone. There is always something underlying.
Absolutely.